Brother Waqqas emails from New York, and he says whether zakat can be given to build a masjid in Western lands.
وما أرسلنا من قبلك إلا رجالا نوحي إليهم فاسألوا أهل الذكر إن كنتم لا تعلمون.
So I just went over in the previous question the 8 categories of zakah, and I mentioned one of them being وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, and in the way of Allah. Okay, now what does in the way of Allah mean? The majority of our ulama, past and present, have said that this is restricted to a legitimate, defense of the Muslim lands that involves military expenses. So, وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ is the military branch of an actual Islamic land in which the land must be defended, against any attacks and threats. And so, how are you going to finance this in the pre-modern times? So, a portion of zakat, one of the 8 categories, was considered to be وَفِي sabilillah, and this is the predominant position past and present. However, since the beginning of time, there has been another interpretation that why, no doubt, the military branch of an Islamic land definitely deserves to be financed. However, the Quran doesn't say the military branch. The Quran says وَفِي sabilillah. And so the position of quite a few ulama, and in fact, Fakhruddin al-Razi, in his famous Tafsir al-Kabir, he mentions this, that وَعْلَمْ أَنَّ ظَاهِرَ اللَّفْظِ فِي قَوْلِ وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ لَا يُوجِبُ الْقَصْرَ عَلَى كُلِّ الْغُزَاةِ. فلهذا المعنى نقل الكفال في تفسيره عن بعض الفقهاء أن مجاز صرف الصدقات إلى جميع وجوه الخير من تكفيل الموتى وبناء الحصون وعمارة المساجد لأن قوله تعالى وفي سبيل الله عام في الكل. I mentioned the whole Arabic so that you understand this is not something that is new. Fakhruddin al-Razi, who died in 610 Hijri, he says that the wording of the Quran, وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ, is open enough to allow for more than just military expenditure. And that is why Al-Qaffal, another great scholar that is a century earlier than him, Al-Qaffal mentioned from a number of scholars that you may give zakat in all areas that is good, such as, and then he has a such as list. For example, he says, the takfeen al-mawta, so spending on the funerals of people that cannot afford to pay their funerals, or to make the masajid running, so you're spending the money on the masajid. Why? Because وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ عَامٌ فِي الْكُلِّ, it encompasses all of these things. So there is another opinion that وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ can be used for other than military expenditure of an Islamic state. And this is the position of many of the fiqh councils of the world today, including the famous Shaykh al-Qardawi, including the European Council of Fiqh, in which they said in a position that is published on their website that وَفِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ can include anything that is for the benefit of the ummah, and that includes even, for example, teaching people about Islam, teaching non-Muslims about Islam, because this is the modern version of, basically back then they would have to spend money on the military, and in our times we need to spend money on the intellectual brains, we need to spend money on the tongue and on the pen and on publications and pamphlets and on da'wah. And they also included in this that masajids in non-Muslim lands in particular, because their fatwa was meant for non-Muslim lands, that masajid is meant to preserve the iman of the Muslims. So this is a benefit that goes back to the entire community. So this is the fatwa from the European Fiqh Council and Shaykh al-Qardawi. As for here in America, the American Muslim Jurist Association, or AMJA, they had a middle position, which is something that I'm very sympathetic to. So AMJA has a fatwa on their website in which they say that the default is that you should not give zakat to the masajid. and that you strive your utmost to find alternative funds from other sources to finance the masjid. So general charity and sadaqah and qard. You may get a loan, non-interest. So a community member says, I'll give you 100,000 loan and you pay it back over a few years. And so this is my loan unto you. So this is also allowed. However, Amjad says that in exceptional circumstances, case by case basis, when other sources are simply not possible, then this may be permitted to use zakat money for the purchase or the acquisition or the maintenance of the masjid. And I like this fatwa. It is a fatwa that is reasonable given the realities of the world that we live in. We do not open the door. We say the default is that zakat cannot be used for the masajid. And that's the fatwa we give as the default. Now, somebody comes and says, oh, but hold on a sec. If we, let me give you an example. And this has happened again because we are in America. Like, we know these types of things all the time. That sometimes a previous board might have done a very unwise thing of taking a loan from the bank, to get the masjid. Okay, they followed their fatwa and whatnot, and now they have to pay back a large amount every single year. If they don't pay that money back, right? If they don't pay that money back, the bank will confiscate the masjid. Or another realistic scenario, and again I have seen this myself. It has happened in a particular city that I visited. That the community did not have a masjid, and I actually went to this community in one of the smaller cities of New York, State New York. So the people outside of America should know New York is a city, and New York is also a state. And the state of New York has lots of beautiful small cities and villages and whatnot. So I visited one of these, and they did not have a functioning masjid over there. And they were collecting funds for the longest time, and a particular church was shutting down. And it was ideal, purpose built. You just had to make some modifications, changes, do that. It's their nice big hall, prime location. And the owners of the church were willing to negotiate and give them a good deal, but they did not have that amount. I forgot how much it was. Maybe it was 500,000, whatever it was. It was a good deal. They said, here's the cash offer below the price. We want to give it to another community that's going to worship rather than give it to a building or whatnot. So they were good people. They wanted actually to give it to another religious group, and they were happy that Muslims are going to buy it, but they wanted to sell cash, and the offer that they had was very good, but the Muslim community did not have the funds. And they asked, in this particular case, we tried. Nobody's going to come and write us a check of $500,000. Can we open this door of zakat? And in their particular case, some ulama said, yes, okay, you may take zakat for your particular circumstance because it's too good of a deal. You don't have a masjid. Now you're getting this masjid. So for the time being, if you cannot find qard hasana, if you cannot find sadaqah, you try to do a nationwide campaign, you're not getting it. Because you see, a lot of people, they say, why don't you just do a campaign? Subhanallah, every single city in North America, every single masjid in the Western lands, it pretty much is struggling, and they're trying to figure out how to gain funds. It's not as if, there's like a surplus of people wanting to give. So we have to be reasonable, and I liked Amjad's fatwa in that it has a middle ground here. And that middle ground, case by case basis. So if your community is in dire situations, reach out to a scholar that you trust or a group of scholars. Ask them to look into your affairs and to then see, do you qualify for that exception or not. The default though is you do not open this door and you only use sadaqah for the masajid and for all of the other things. However, even by the way, Amjad gave the fatwa that during the COVID crises, that if the masjid cannot maintain, because again, a lot of masajid were getting shut down, and I actually remember I did an appeal on Facebook because I heard so many imams, were struggling to get food on their table. A'udhu billah, the communities could not even pay them their salaries when the COVID crisis began. Wallahi, this was an injustice. And in this time and in this reality, these are people that have dedicated their lives for Islam, for teaching your children the Quran. Now when they need you the most, khalas, you turn your back on them. Sorry, there's no donations coming in. No, in these dire circumstances, we have to think outside the box and realize that, yes, indeed, what the European Council and Shaykh Qardawi and others are saying has a modicum of sense. Fakhruddin al-Razi mentions this before, that all of these are fi sabilillah in some way. You are operating in the way of Allah, for Allah, bringing people to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the masjid, and people giving da'wah and doing things that are benefiting to the ummah. How can this not be overall fi sabilillah? And so I would say, if there is a need, then open this door. Otherwise, the default is we try our best to stick with the majority position, and that is that zakat is not allowed for masajid, and Allah Azza wa Jal knows best.
يا من أجبت دعاء نوح فانتصر وحملته في فلكك المشحون يا من أحال النار حول خليله روحا وريحانا بقولك كن